some of Jack and Lily's belongings from Lansdowne.
After 9 months of silence, after 9 months of unimaginable grief, after 9 months of watching from the sidelines as their family members were publicly accused of horrific crimes, the Sullivan family has finally decided to speak. In an exclusive interview that's sending shockwaves through this case, family members of Lilly and Jack Sullivan are breaking their silence about what they observed in the months leading up to the children's disappearance, what they really think happened on May 2nd, 2025, and what they want the public to know about 2 innocent children who deserved so much better. This is the first time anyone from the family has spoken publicly since Daniel Martell was arrested and charged 3 months ago. What they're revealing is absolutely heartbreaking and provides new insight into the dysfunction, the warning signs, and the failures that led to this tragedy. These family members saw things that troubled them deeply. They raised concerns that weren't acted upon. They tried to help in ways that ultimately weren't enough. And now they're speaking out because they believe the public needs to understand the full picture of who Lilly and Jack were, what their lives were really like, and why this case represents a catastrophic failure of the systems meant to protect vulnerable children. Before we share what the family revealed in this emotional interview, you absolutely need to subscribe to True Crime Vault right now and hit that notification bell. This is exclusive content you won't find anywhere else. We've been covering the Sullivan case from the very beginning, with depth and detail that goes beyond surface-level reporting. If you want to stay informed as this case continues to develop and move through the courts, subscribe immediately. Hit that like button because it helps push this critical content to more people who care about justice for Lilly and Jack. Drop your thoughts in the comments as we go through this interview. What stood out most to you? Do you think the family could have done more to save these children? Let's discuss this together as a community that refuses to let Lilly and Jack be forgotten. Before we continue with what the family revealed in this interview, let me take you through the complete story of what happened to Lilly and Jack Sullivan, for those who may be new to this case or need a comprehensive refresher on the timeline and evidence. This is one of the most disturbing cases to emerge from Canada in recent years, and understanding the full background is essential to appreciating what the family is now revealing. On May 2nd, 2025, at 10:01 in the morning, a 911 call came into emergency dispatch in Pictou County, Nova Scotia. Malia Brooks Murray was calling to report that her 2 children had vanished from their property. 6-year-old Lily Sullivan and 4-year-old Jack Sullivan had apparently disappeared while playing in the backyard of the family's rural home in Lansdowne Station. According to Malehya's account to the operator, the children had been playing outside that morning. It was a nice spring day, finally warm enough for kids to play outdoors comfortably. She and her partner Daniel Martell were inside the house with their 1-year-old daughter Meadow. They could hear the children through open windows, the sounds of kids playing and having fun. But then it went quiet, that eerie silence that makes parents check on their kids. When Malehya and Daniel went outside to see what the children were doing, Lilly and Jack were nowhere to be found. They had simply vanished. The back gate that led from their yard into dense wilderness was standing wide open. Within an hour of that call, one of the largest search operations in Nova Scotia history was underway. Police officers from multiple RCMP detachments converged on the area. Search and rescue teams mobilized. Volunteers began arriving, responding to calls on social media and local radio. By afternoon, over 100 people were combing through the dense woods surrounding the property. Trained search dogs were tracking scents through rough terrain. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras flew grid patterns overhead. Drones covered areas too difficult for ground teams to access. Everyone involved believed they were looking for 2 young children who had simply wandered off and gotten lost in dangerous wilderness. Every minute mattered because temperatures at night could still drop near freezing, and 2 small children would have no survival skills in that environment. Malehya and Daniel appeared before news cameras that first day looking absolutely devastated. Malehya could barely speak through her tears as she begged whoever was watching to help find her babies and bring them home safely. Daniel stood beside her, jaw clenched, hands trembling, looking like a man barely holding himself together under the weight of every parent's worst nightmare. They released home videos of the children to media outlets. Footage of Lily laughing and playing on a swing set, her blonde hair catching the sunlight. Video of Jack running energetically around the yard, his infectious 4-year-old laugh captured on camera. They did everything that grieving, terrified parents of missing children are expected to do. They cooperated fully with police. They participated in searches. They provided detailed information about what the children were wearing, their heights and weights, any distinguishing features. They made emotional public appeals for anyone with information to come forward. The community response was overwhelming. Vigils were held where hundreds of people gathered to pray for the children's safe return. Ribbons were tied to trees throughout the area. Social media exploded with shares and prayers. A reward fund was established and quickly grew to $150,000 for information leading to finding the children or to arrests in the case. The entire nation watched and waited, hoping for a miracle, hoping these two innocent kids would be found alive. But behind the scenes, away from cameras and public attention, investigators were already noticing things that didn't add up. Small inconsistencies in Daniel and Malehya's accounts of what happened. Details that shifted slightly between separate interviews, a timeline that had problems when examined closely. And the more investigators dug into the background of this family, the more troubling things they discovered. The last confirmed independent sighting of Lilly and Jack alive came from security footage at a Dollarama store in the neighboring town of New Glasgow. The timestamp showed 2:25 p.m. on May 1st, the day before the children were reported missing. The footage captured all 5 family members shopping together. Malehya pushing a shopping cart with baby Meadow secured in the seat, Daniel walking alongside, and Lilly and Jack moving through the store, looking at items on shelves, behaving like completely normal children on a routine shopping trip with their family. Nothing about their demeanor or behavior suggested anything was wrong. They looked healthy and well. But this security footage represented the absolute last time anyone outside the immediate family could verify with certainty that Lilly and Jack Sullivan were alive. After that shopping trip concluded, the family returned home to their property in Lansdowne Station, arriving back around 3 or 4 p.m. based on the distance traveled. From that point forward, only Daniel Martell and Malehya Brooks Murray claimed to have seen the children alive. There were no neighbors who saw the kids playing outside that evening. No delivery drivers or mail carriers who noticed them. No other witnesses of any kind who could independently verify the children were alive and well during those critical hours. This created a significant and troubling gap of approximately 18 to 19 hours, where investigators had to rely entirely on the word of 2 people who would eventually become the primary suspects in the children's disappearance and presumed deaths. According to Daniel and Malehya's account, which they maintained consistently from the beginning, the evening of May 1st was completely normal and unremarkable. They claimed the children ate dinner with the family around the usual time. They claimed the kids played for a while afterward, doing typical evening activities. They claimed Lilly and Jack went to bed at their normal bedtime, somewhere around 9 or 9:30 p.m. The night supposedly passed uneventfully with no disturbances. The next morning, May 2nd, the children allegedly woke up at their normal time and after getting dressed asked permission to go outside and play in the backyard, which was part of their regular routine when weather permitted. Daniel and Malehya claimed they allowed the children to go outside while they remained inside with baby Meadow, doing normal morning activities. They could hear the children playing through open windows. But then it went quiet. When they investigated the silence and went outside to check, the children were gone, and the back gate stood open. But investigators found numerous problems with this narrative. First, Daniel and Malehya had told people the children were home those days because Lilly had a cough and wasn't feeling well enough to attend school. But teachers later told investigators that Lilly's cough had been quite minor, nothing that would typically require a child to miss multiple consecutive days of school. So, why were Daniel and Malehya so insistent on keeping both children home from school on April 30th, May 1st, and the morning of May 2nd? Investigators came to believe they were deliberately isolating the children from mandatory reporters like teachers who would notice if the kids had new injuries or seemed afraid or distressed. Second, the timeline itself had major problems. Text messages recovered from Daniel and Malehya's phones showed Malehya texting Daniel at 7:15 p.m. on May 1st, saying the kids were already in bed. But in their statements to police, both Daniel and Malehya clearly said the children went to bed around 9 or 9:30 p.m. That's a discrepancy of more than 2 hours. Why would they lie about what time the children went to bed, unless something had happened during those unaccounted hours that they needed to hide? Third, Daniel's movements on the night of May 1st were suspicious. Security footage from a gas station 30 kilometers from the Sullivan property showed a vehicle matching Daniel's truck at 11:47 p.m. The driver's build and movements were consistent with Daniel. But when initially questioned by investigators, Daniel stated unequivocally that he had been home all night and never left the property. It was only after being confronted with the security footage that his story changed. Suddenly he claimed he had forgotten about making a quick trip out, that the stress of the missing children had caused the memory to slip his mind. But you don't forget leaving your house near midnight on the last night anyone can verify your children were alive. Fourth, cell phone tower data placed Daniel's phone in a remote wooded area several kilometers from his property at approximately 5:30 a.m. on May 2nd. His phone remained in that area for roughly 30 minutes based on tower ping data. A delivery driver making early morning rounds reported seeing a truck matching Daniel's vehicle description parked on a service road in that same wooded area around 5:45 a.m. When asked to explain why he was in that location at that hour, Daniel couldn't provide any credible explanation. He vaguely suggested he might have been driving around because he couldn't sleep, but claimed he didn't specifically remember going to that particular area. Fifth, forensic examination of the house revealed deeply troubling evidence. When investigators used luminol, which makes blood visible even after cleaning attempts, they discovered blood traces in multiple locations. In Jack's bedroom, luminol revealed blood on the floor near his bed. In the bathroom, blood traces appeared on the floor near the bathtub and on the wall. DNA testing conclusively matched this blood to Lilly and Jack Sullivan. Both children had bled inside that house. This directly contradicted the story that they had simply walked outside one morning and vanished into wilderness. Something had happened to them inside that home while only Daniel and Malehya were present. Sixth, soil analysis conducted at 3 specific locations on the Sullivan property detected chemical markers that are consistent with human decomposition. These are specific compounds including elevated nitrogen levels and changes in soil pH that occur when human bodies break down. The presence of these markers strongly suggested that bodies had been placed at those locations temporarily before being moved elsewhere for more permanent disposal. Seventh, cadaver dogs brought to the property on multiple occasions showed interest behavior at several locations. They didn't give the full trained alert that would indicate definitive presence of human remains, but they displayed behavior indicating they were detecting something biological that caught their attention. The dogs showed particular interest in the same 3 locations where soil analysis later detected decomposition markers, and they also showed interest in areas leading toward the woods where Daniel's phone had pinged that early morning. Eighth, financial records revealed large cash withdrawals from Malehya's bank account in the 2 weeks immediately before the children disappeared. Over $2,000 was withdrawn in multiple transactions. When questioned about where this money went, neither Daniel nor Malehya could provide adequate explanations. Cash purchases leave no electronic trail, which makes them attractive for buying items you don't want traced back to you, items that might be used in covering up crimes. Ninth, internet search history from computers and phones in the household revealed disturbing research conducted in the 72 hours before May 2nd. Someone had searched for information about how long children can survive in cold weather conditions. Someone had researched how police investigate missing persons cases. Someone had looked up information about what evidence investigators look for at crime scenes and how to avoid leaving forensic traces. This was clearly preparation and planning, not casual interest. 10th, text messages between Daniel and Malehya revealed a relationship under tremendous strain and resentment specifically directed at the children. Messages showed them discussing how much better their lives would be without Lilly and Jack. Messages showed them calculating how much money they would save if they didn't have to support the children. Messages showed Malehya expressing that she felt like she'd made a mistake having kids and wished she could start over. Messages showed Daniel agreeing they would be better off without the children in their lives. And finally, text messages after the children disappeared showed clear consciousness of guilt and coordination to maintain false narratives. Messages showed them reminding each other what story to tell police. Messages showed them discussing what questions investigators had asked and making sure their answers aligned. Messages showed Malehya asking, "What if they find out?" and Daniel responding, "They won't if we stick to the plan." Messages showed explicit references to what we did and instructions not to say things in texts because someone might see them. All of this pointed to two people who knew they had committed serious crimes and were desperately trying to avoid being caught. After 7 months of investigation, after accumulating overwhelming evidence, Daniel Martell was finally arrested and charged with 3 serious criminal offenses: obstruction of justice for lying to police and interfering with the investigation, interference with human remains for disposing of the children's bodies, and 2 counts of accessory after the fact to manslaughter, based on prosecutors' belief that Malehya had caused the deaths and Daniel had helped cover it up. Daniel is currently in custody awaiting trial. Charges against Malehya are expected imminently. That's the background of this case. 2 innocent children who deserved love and protection instead received mistreatment and death from the adults responsible for their care. A mother and her partner who decided covering up what happened was preferable to facing consequences. A system that had multiple warning signs but didn't act quickly enough. And a community that's been devastated by this tragedy and is demanding justice. Now, with that context established, let's return to what the family members revealed in their exclusive interview. The family members who agreed to this interview are maternal relatives of Lilly and Jack Sullivan. They are people who knew these children from birth, who were present in their lives regularly, who loved them deeply and watched helplessly as the situation in Malehya's household deteriorated. They've chosen to remain anonymous in this interview to protect their privacy and safety, particularly given the ongoing criminal proceedings against Daniel Martell and the expected charges against Malehya Brooks Murray. But their identities have been verified and their relationship to the children confirmed. These are people who have every right to speak about Lilly and Jack and what happened to them. These are grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins who celebrated birthdays with these children, who gave them Christmas presents, who attended school events, who were supposed to watch them grow up. Instead, they're left mourning and demanding answers. The interview began with the family members describing who Lilly and Jack were as children, beyond the pictures that have been shared in media coverage, beyond the brief descriptions that reduce them to statistics in a criminal case. They wanted the world to understand these were real children with distinct personalities, with hopes and dreams, with futures that were stolen from them. One family member described Lilly as an old soul who seemed wise beyond her 6 years. She was thoughtful and observant, always watching and taking everything in. She noticed details other children her age would miss. She would comment on people's emotions, asking why someone looked sad or if they were feeling okay. This emotional intelligence was remarkable in such a young child. She loved art and would spend hours drawing elaborate pictures with incredible attention to detail. She was particularly drawn to drawing animals and nature scenes. She had a favorite set of colored pencils that she guarded carefully and used to create pictures she would give to family members as gifts. Those pictures, now precious keepsakes, hang in family members' homes as reminders of the creative, gentle child they lost. Lilly's drawings showed real talent for her age. Family members would save every picture she gave them, and looking at them now is both beautiful and heartbreaking. The pictures show a child with imagination and skill who might have grown up to be a real artist if she'd been given the chance. One family member keeps a drawing Lilly made of a butterfly on a flower on their refrigerator. It's been there for over a year now. They can't bring themselves to take it down. Every time they see it, they're reminded of Lilly's gentle spirit and the future she should have had. Another family member has a picture Lilly drew of the whole family together, stick figures holding hands with names carefully labeled above each person. Jack is right next to Lilly in the drawing, the 2 siblings side by side as they always were in life. Lilly was also described as being very protective of her younger brother Jack. Despite being only 2 years older, she took her role as big sister extremely seriously. She would hold his hand when they walked anywhere. She would make sure he had enough to eat before she ate her own food. She would stand up for him if anyone was mean to him. The bond between Lilly and Jack was exceptionally strong, the kind of sibling connection that comes from relying on each other in difficult circumstances. They were each other's constant companions and protectors in a home that wasn't always safe or stable. That makes what happened to them even more heartbreaking because they were together when they died, probably frightened and confused, unable to protect each other from the adults who should have been protecting them. Family members believe strongly that Lilly would have tried to protect Jack until the very end. That was who she was. That was her nature. And it breaks their hearts to think of her final moments. Jack was described as being full of energy and curiosity, despite the difficult circumstances of his young life. He was fascinated by how things worked, always asking questions about everything he encountered. Why do trucks have so many wheels? How do birds fly? Where does rain come from? Why is the sky blue? How do fish breathe underwater? His curiosity was boundless and exhausting for adults trying to keep up with his constant stream of questions. But family members loved this about him. They loved his enthusiasm for learning and discovering. They loved trying to answer his questions in ways a 4-year-old could understand. He would listen intently to explanations, his face serious and focused, processing the information. Then he would ask 3 follow-up questions that showed he was really thinking deeply about the topic. Jack loved being outside more than anything, regardless of weather. He would happily play in mud puddles, climb trees, chase insects, explore every inch of whatever outdoor space was available to him. Family members remember him coming to visits covered in dirt from head to toe, grinning with pure joy at whatever adventure he'd been on. His hands would be filthy, his clothes stained, leaves and twigs in his hair, and he'd be absolutely delighted with himself. That exuberant, joyful child deserved to grow up and have a full life of adventures. He deserved to grow up and maybe work with the big trucks and construction equipment he was so fascinated by. He deserved decades of life, not just 4 short years. One family member shared a memory of taking Jack to watch a construction site near their home. They stood at the fence for over an hour while Jack watched the excavators and dump trucks working. He knew the names of all the equipment. He could explain what each machine was doing. He talked the entire time about how the machines worked, asking questions, making observations, completely absorbed in what he was watching. That family member treasures that memory now. An ordinary afternoon that seemed unremarkable at the time has become precious because there will be no more afternoons with Jack. No more opportunities to indulge his curiosity and watch his face light up with excitement. But the family members also described concerning changes they noticed in both children in the months before they disappeared. These weren't just normal developmental changes or phases children go through. These were signs of children under stress, children experiencing trauma, children who weren't safe in their home environment. Lily, who had always been talkative and engaged with family members, became increasingly quiet and withdrawn. She would sit silently during family gatherings when previously she would have been chatting constantly and showing everyone her latest drawings. When asked direct questions, her answers became shorter and vaguer. She stopped making eye contact the way she used to. She seemed anxious and on edge, constantly looking around as if checking to see if someone was watching or listening to her. One family member described trying to have a conversation with Lily during a visit about 6 weeks before the disappearance. Lily had always loved talking to this particular family member about her drawings and her ideas for pictures she wanted to create. But during this visit, Lily barely responded. She gave one-word answers. She wouldn't look up from the ground. The family member asked if something was wrong, if something had happened at home or at school. Lily just shook her head and said everything was fine, but her body language and demeanor said the opposite. The family member didn't push harder because they didn't want to make Lily uncomfortable, but they deeply regret that now. Maybe if they'd pressed for more information, maybe if they'd gotten Lily to open up about what was happening, maybe something could have been done. Jack's behavior also changed in troubling ways. His natural energy and curiosity started to seem more like hypervigilance and anxiety. He couldn't sit still. He startled easily at loud noises or sudden movements. He became more clingy with family members during visits, not wanting to let them out of his sight, becoming distressed when it was time to leave and go home. One family member described how Jack would sometimes ask if he could stay at their house instead of going back to Malehya's, a question that broke their heart because they didn't have legal authority to keep the children even when they wanted to. The family member would have to explain that Jack lived with his mom and had to go home with her. Jack would become quiet and withdrawn after being told he couldn't stay. Looking back, the family member wonders if Jack was trying to tell them he wasn't safe at home, if those requests to stay were his way of asking for help. Family members also noticed physical signs that deeply concerned them. Bruises that appeared with increasing frequency on both children, but particularly on Jack. When asked about the bruises, the children's explanations seemed rehearsed or coached. They would immediately say they fell or bumped into something before the question was even fully asked. The bruises were often in locations that didn't match those explanations. Bruises on upper arms that looked like grip marks, fingerprints visible in the discoloration. bruises on backs or torsos where you don't typically get injured from falling during normal play. Family members took photos of some of these bruises, documentation that has since been turned over to police as evidence in the investigation. One particularly concerning incident happened about 2 months before the disappearance. Jack came to a family gathering with a bruise on his upper arm that was clearly in the shape of adult fingers. When a family member asked what happened, Jack immediately said he fell off his bike. But the family knew Jack didn't have a bike, or at least had never mentioned having one before. When gently pressed about this, Jack looked panicked and changed his story to say he fell at a friend's house while riding their bike. The family member tried to ask more questions, but Malehya intervened, saying Jack was clumsy and always hurting himself, and that everyone needed to stop interrogating him about every little bump and bruise. The conversation ended there, but the family member took a photo of the bruise later when Jack wasn't paying attention. That photo is now part of the evidence file. The family members described the difficult position they were in. They saw concerning signs. They suspected something wasn't right in Malehya's household, but they didn't have concrete proof of specific mistreatment. They didn't witness actual incidents of harm being inflicted. And they knew from experience that making accusations against Malehya, especially involving child welfare authorities, would result in her cutting them off completely from access to the children. This is a heartbreaking dilemma that many family members of at-risk children face. Do you voice your concerns and risk losing all contact with the children you're trying to protect? Or do you stay quiet and maintain access, hoping your presence provides some safety and stability? It's an impossible choice with no right answer. In this case, some family members did make reports to Child Protective Services expressing their concerns. They called the hotline and described what they'd observed. They documented bruises with photos and dates. They provided their names and contact information and said they were available to provide more information or evidence if needed. They urged authorities to investigate the household and check on the children's welfare. But those reports, like the report from Lily's teacher, didn't result in timely intervention. The reports were logged into the system. Case numbers were generated. But actual investigation and action didn't happen before the children disappeared. The system was too overwhelmed, too understaffed, too slow. Social workers had massive caseloads and had to triage which cases to prioritize. A report about bruises that could potentially be explained by normal childhood accidents doesn't get the same immediate attention as reports of severe ongoing mistreatment or immediate danger. By the time any investigation might have been launched, by the time a social worker might have visited the home, the children were already gone. The family members live with tremendous guilt about this, constantly replaying scenarios in their minds and wondering what they could have done differently to save Lily and Jack. Should they have been more aggressive in their reports, calling multiple times instead of just once? Should they have shown up at Child Protective Services offices in person demanding immediate action? Should they have contacted police directly instead of, or in addition to, child welfare? Should they have sought legal custody of the children, hiring attorneys and filing court petitions? All of these options involve significant time, money, and legal complexity that most families don't have resources for. And even if they'd pursued these options, there's no guarantee they would have succeeded in removing the children from Malehya's care before tragedy struck. The family members also spoke extensively about Malehya Brooks Murray and their observations of her as a mother in the years before the tragedy. They described a complicated picture of someone who loved her children in some ways, but was fundamentally unable or unwilling to provide the consistent, stable care that children need. Malehya had struggled with parenting from the time Lily was born. She was young, barely 20 years old when she had Lily. She was in an unstable relationship with Cody Sullivan, who had his own serious problems, including substance use issues and an inability to hold employment. They were living in poverty, moving frequently between temporary housing situations, dealing with constant financial stress. Malehya had no real parenting role models or support system. Her own upbringing had been difficult with its own dysfunction. She was trying to figure out how to be a mother without having experienced good mothering herself. The family tried to provide support and assistance. They offered to help with childcare, giving Malehya breaks when she needed them. They provided money when Malehya couldn't afford necessities like diapers and formula. They tried to teach parenting skills and offer guidance about age-appropriate expectations and discipline. But Malehya was resistant to help and advice. She was defensive about any perceived criticism of her parenting. She interpreted offers of help as judgments that she was doing things wrong. She would cut off family members who expressed concerns, sometimes for months at a time, using access to the children as leverage and punishment. This created a dynamic where family members felt they had to walk on eggshells, being careful not to say anything that would upset Malehya and result in being cut off. When Malehya temporarily lost custody of Lilly and Jack approximately 2 years before they disappeared, the family hoped it would be a wake-up call that led to real changes. The children went to live with their maternal grandmother for several months, while Malehya was supposed to be addressing whatever issues had led to the removal. The specific circumstances of that removal are still not entirely clear to extended family members because those records are sealed. But they know it involved concerns about Malehya's ability to care for the children properly and provide a safe, stable environment. During the months the children lived with their grandmother, they seemed to thrive. They were cleaner, better fed, more relaxed. They attended school and daycare regularly. They had routines and structure. The grandmother loved having them, but also found caring for 2 young children exhausting at her age. It wasn't a permanent solution. Family members hoped Malehya would use that time to get help, to develop better coping skills, to recognize she needed to make changes for the safety of her children. And for a while after she regained custody, things seemed somewhat better. She was more engaged with the children. She seemed to be trying harder. She was attending parenting classes that had been required as a condition of regaining custody. She was keeping the children cleaner and making sure they got to school. Family members were cautiously optimistic that maybe losing custody had been the wake-up call Malehya needed. But gradually, the old patterns reasserted themselves. The stress and dysfunction returned. Malehya stopped attending parenting classes once they were no longer court-mandated. The children started missing school more frequently again. The signs of neglect and possible mistreatment started appearing again. And then Daniel Martell entered the picture, and everything got worse. The family members were unanimous in their negative assessment of Daniel Martell and his influence on the situation. From the moment Malehya started her relationship with Daniel, family members saw concerning signs. Daniel had no patience with the children. He was dismissive of them. He seemed to view them as burdens and obstacles rather than as children who deserved care and compassion. He was rough in his physical handling of them, grabbing them harshly when they weren't behaving the way he wanted. He would grab Jack by the arm and jerk him around if Jack was being too loud or energetic. He would speak harshly to Lilly if she was taking too long to do something he'd asked. He spoke to both children with contempt, using harsh words and tones that were completely inappropriate for young children. He would call them annoying, say they were in the way, make comments about how much easier life would be without them around. Family members witnessed these interactions during visits and were deeply troubled by what they saw. During one visit to a family member's home, Daniel grabbed Jack roughly when Jack accidentally knocked over a glass of water. He grabbed Jack's arm hard enough that Jack cried out in pain and tried to pull away. The family member intervened, telling Daniel that was too rough and he needed to be gentler with a 4-year-old. Daniel became defensive and angry, saying Jack needed to learn to be more careful and that everyone was too soft on these kids. Malehya didn't say anything during this exchange, didn't defend her son or tell Daniel to be gentler. She just looked uncomfortable and tried to change the subject. This was a pattern family members noticed repeatedly. Daniel would be harsh or rough with the children. Family members would object or look uncomfortable. Malehya would make excuses or stay silent. Several family members tried to talk to Malehya privately about their concerns regarding Daniel's treatment of the children. They suggested the relationship wasn't healthy. They urged Malehya to prioritize her children's well-being over her relationship with a man who clearly didn't respect or care for them. They pointed out specific incidents they'd witnessed of Daniel being too rough or speaking inappropriately to the children. But Malehya was defensive and unwilling to hear criticism of Daniel. She would make excuses for his behavior, saying he was just stressed about money or that he wasn't used to being around kids or that family members were being too judgmental. She would blame the children for provoking Daniel with their behavior. She would insist that Daniel was good to her and the children and that family members were interfering and not understanding the situation. These conversations invariably ended badly with Malehya angry and family members frustrated that their concerns weren't being taken seriously. As Malehya's relationship with Daniel became more serious and he moved into the household permanently, family members noticed they were seeing less and less of Lilly and Jack. Visits that had been regular, Maybe once a week or every other week became sporadic, maybe once a month if that. Invitations to family gatherings would be declined with vague excuses about the kids being sick or having other plans. Phone calls would go unanswered. Text messages would be ignored or get one-word responses. When family members did manage to see the children, the visits were increasingly supervised by Daniel, or happened with Daniel present in ways that made private conversations impossible. Daniel would sit in the room during visits, watching and listening to everything. The children seemed more guarded and less willing to talk freely. They would glance at Daniel before answering questions, as if checking to see if it was okay to respond. It became clear that Malehya and Daniel were isolating the children from family support systems, a classic warning sign in mistreatment situations, but one that's difficult to address when you don't have legal rights regarding the children. Family members tried reaching out more frequently, offering to take the children for outings or overnight visits to give Malehya and Daniel a break. Sometimes these offers were accepted, but increasingly they were declined with excuses. The isolation became more complete as time went on. In the final month before the disappearance, some family members didn't see the children at all, despite multiple attempts to arrange visits. The financial stress in Malehya and Daniel's household was obvious to family members. Both were chronically underemployed. They were always behind on bills. They were frequently asking family members for money with stories about emergencies or unexpected expenses. The car needed repairs. The electricity was about to be shut off. They needed money for groceries because they were completely out of food. They needed gas money to get to job interviews. The requests were constant and came from both Malehya and Daniel. Some family members helped financially when they could, motivated by wanting to ensure the children had food and necessities. If giving Malehya $50 meant the kids had groceries that week, it seemed worth it. But there was frustration that money given to help the children often seemed to be spent on other things. Family members would give money specifically for the children's needs, only to later see social media posts showing Malehya and Daniel had gone out to eat or had purchased cigarettes or alcohol or other non-essential items for themselves. This created resentment, and eventually some family members stopped providing financial assistance because they felt it wasn't actually benefiting the children. They couldn't keep giving money that was supposed to buy food for Lilly and Jack, but was instead spent on things for Daniel and Malehya. But then they felt guilty because refusing to help meant the children might go without. It was another impossible situation with no good options. In the final months before the disappearance, family members described Malehya as seeming increasingly overwhelmed and at the end of her rope. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and a generally run-down appearance. She had gained weight and stopped taking care of her appearance the way she used to. Her hair would be unwashed and pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore the same clothes repeatedly without washing them. She seemed depressed and defeated. She would make comments about how hard everything was, how she couldn't handle the stress, how she wished things were different. She talked about being overwhelmed by the demands of 3 kids, about never having any time or money, about feeling trapped in her situation with no way out. In retrospect, these comments take on ominous meaning, but at the time, family members interpreted them as normal parental stress and frustration that lots of parents feel, especially parents dealing with poverty and unstable housing and relationship problems. They didn't think Malehya was expressing thoughts of actually harming the children. They thought she was just venting about how hard parenting is. If they'd understood these comments as warning signs of something more serious, maybe they would have reacted differently. But hindsight is always clearer than the moment. The last time most family members saw Lilly and Jack alive was at a family gathering approximately 3 weeks before they disappeared. It was a Sunday afternoon gathering at a family member's home. Several relatives were there, including grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. The children seemed more withdrawn than usual. Jack had visible bruising on his arm that he explained away as having fallen off his bike. When a family member pointed out Jack didn't have a bike, he quickly changed his story to say he fell at a friend's house. Lilly was very quiet and spent most of the gathering sitting by herself on a couch rather than playing with other children who were there. Several family members tried to engage with her, asking about school and her drawings and what she'd been doing lately, but her responses were minimal. She would nod or shake her head or give one-word answers, but wouldn't elaborate or make conversation the way she used to. One family member specifically remembers asking Lilly if everything was okay at home, if school was going well, if she was happy. Lilly just shrugged and said everything was fine. But something about her demeanor suggested things were not fine at all. Her eyes looked sad. Her shoulders were slumped. She wouldn't make eye contact. That family member regrets not pushing harder for answers, not insisting on private time with Lilly away from Daniel and Malehya to really find out what was happening. But Daniel and Malehya left that gathering fairly quickly, saying they needed to get home to put the kids down for naps. That was the last time that family member saw Lilly alive. The last words they exchanged were that brief conversation where Lilly said everything was fine when clearly it wasn't. That family member will carry that regret forever. When news broke on May 2nd that Lilly and Jack were missing, family members' initial reaction was fear that the children had genuinely wandered off and gotten lost in the wilderness surrounding the property. They mobilized immediately to help with searches. They drove to the area and joined search parties combing through woods. They spread the word through their networks, posting on social media and calling everyone they knew asking for help. They contacted media to get coverage and public attention. They organized volunteers. They did everything possible to help find the children. Those first 48 hours were a blur of activity and hope that the children would be found alive, maybe cold and scared, but fundamentally okay. But even in those first hours and days, some family members had nagging doubts about the story Malehya and Daniel were telling. Something didn't sit right. The children wandering off at the same time didn't make sense given Lilly's protective nature toward Jack. Lilly would never have let Jack wander into woods without her, and she was responsible enough at 6 years old to know you don't go into wilderness without telling adults. The timing seemed suspicious. The gate being open felt too convenient, like a detail added to make the story more plausible. And Malehya and Daniel's behavior during searches and media appearances seemed off in ways family members couldn't quite articulate, but felt in their guts. Malehya's tears seemed forced or performative. Daniel seemed more annoyed than distressed. Their body language together seemed coordinated rather than natural. As the investigation progressed and information began to leak out about evidence investigators were finding, family members' suspicions solidified into horrible certainty. The blood evidence in the house confirmed the children hadn't simply wandered outside. The forensic evidence about decomposition markers suggested bodies had been on the property. The timeline problems and lies Daniel told about his movements indicated deliberate cover-up. The text messages that eventually leaked showed consciousness of guilt and coordination between Malehya and Daniel to maintain false narratives. Each new piece of information was devastating and painted a clearer picture that Lilly and Jack had been harmed by the very people supposed to protect them. The family describes the emotional journey of coming to accept this reality as excruciating. First, there was the hope the children were lost, but would be found. Then the growing fear as days passed with no trace. Then the suspicion that something wasn't right about the parents' story. Then the horrible realization that Malehya and Daniel were probably responsible. Then the confirmation as evidence mounted. And finally, the grief and rage of knowing the children are dead and were killed by their own mother and her partner. It's a grief that doesn't have a clear path to resolution because there are no bodies to bury, no closure of a funeral, no grave to visit. Just the knowledge that Lilly and Jack are gone and the people who should have protected them destroyed them instead. The family members describe feeling profound guilt that they didn't do more to save the children. They replay interactions over and over in their minds, analyzing things that were said or observed, looking for opportunities where different actions might have changed the outcome. What if they'd been more aggressive in their reports to child welfare, calling every day instead of just once? What if they'd sought legal custody of the children earlier, before Daniel moved in and things got even worse? What if they'd confronted Malehya and Daniel more directly about the mistreatment they suspected, instead of trying to maintain relationships to keep access? What if they'd called police when they saw bruises instead of just documenting them? What if they'd refused to leave the children with Malehya after seeing concerning signs, even if it meant kidnapping charges? These questions haunt them constantly. They know intellectually that they weren't the ones who harmed Lilly and Jack, that responsibility lies entirely with Malehya and Daniel. They know they did what they could within legal and practical limitations. They know the system failed more than they did. But emotionally they struggle with feeling they should have done more, should have known the danger was more imminent, should have protected those children better. The guilt is crushing at times. Some family members are in therapy trying to process these feelings. Some have trouble sleeping. Some have nightmares about the children. None of them will ever be the same after this tragedy. What do you think about what the family revealed? Does this change how you view the case? Do you think they could have done more to save the children? Share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to True Crime Vault for continuing coverage of this case. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, smash that like button. Thank you for watching.